Hey guys, this is Sukanya Rana and welcome you again to the Streak Initiative where we're covering economic topics for your Prelims 2021. This usually covers some of the current topics which have been there in news for the last 1 year. Use these videos to be somewhat like a break session in between your prelims preparation where you can just revise some of the topics through these video mode, right? So I hope economics section was able to help you out throughout this particular week. In the next week, we are shifting to science and tech and some of the defense related questions. So before again I move on to the first question of the day, here I would like to add that guys, there's a webinar that is going to be held by Sajal sir, that is on 22nd August, and it will be at 7 p.m. So you can check out the link that has been provided in the description box and also visit our website. This webinar is actually going to deal with how to score 125 plus in the prelims. So Sajal sir is going to discuss with you some of the scenarios and some of the common 10 mistakes and what can be done with respect to scoring more marks in prelims. So I think this webinar can be your last minute boost to get that extra 10 to 25 marks in your prelims and sail through the prelims. That is what the basic idea here is. So let's move on to our first question of the day, which is on agricultural infrastructure development cess. So yesterday we did a question on agricultural infrastructure fund. Even the cess was actually introduced in your budget this year. So I keep on repeating again and again, do revise your budget, it's important. So the question is basically dealing with this particular cess. The first statement here is that this particular cess is aimed at not only boosting the production, but also in helping conserve and process farm output efficiently. And the second statement here is that it gives a greater autonomy to the states to use fund effectively based on demand. So the basic question here is what is the idea with respect to this particular cess here, right? So basic description of the cess here. So the answer, if you look here, see, number one thing is that whenever we're talking about any cess, or not just agricultural cess or any other cess, you have to know what is the basic definition of, say, a cess or a surcharge, right? So that is very important if you want to try and attempt the second statement here. So see, whatever money that is collected through cess and surcharge is not actually distributed amongst the states. So that funda of the Finance Commission distribution of 41% does not apply to your cess and surcharges. So all the money that is collected through cess directly goes to the center, and that whole money is utilized by the center, right? So the second statement here is that it gives greater autonomy to states to use fund effectively based on demand is actually wrong. Because in fact, this particular cess and other cess can actually reduce the amount of money that is flowing into the states. So it is about this. Now the first statement here is what is the basic purpose? So I always have told you that whenever you're doing any fund, any cess, you should know what is the basic objective of that particular thing. So this statement is actually right, because this particular cess is actually proposed to improve the agricultural infrastructure, aimed at not only boosting the production but also in helping to conserve and process the farm output effectively. So both the ideas are clubbed into this particular cess and aimed at improving all over efficiency of the system. So basically, see, there have been a lot of issues with respect to the 3 farm laws. So the government was aiming to make sure that the farmers do not think that government is completely not doing anything with respect to the agriculture sector. So this cess will actually help to boost some of the investment that has been lacking in the infrastructure in the agricultural sector, and we've been seeing a lot of funds and cesses that have been introduced with respect to agriculture this year. So that is why this topic is important, and for this question, the answer here is A. Now let us move on to the next question. So this question is about TRIPS. Now, why is this topic important? Because you know, this TRIPS agreement was a lot in news with respect to the COVID-related vaccine, where some of the developing nations have said that this particular vaccine should be kept out of the TRIPS agreement so that there can be easier access and production of vaccine. So that is why I guess this topic becomes very important. You should know some bits and bits about TRIPS agreement. So that is what this question is about. So the very first statement here is that it is an international legal agreement between all the member nations of World Trade Organization. Second, it is negotiated at the end of Geneva Round of General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade between 1989 and 1990. And third is agreement allows compulsory licensing and government use of a patent without the authorization of its owner. So which of these statements are right? For this particular question, I hope you got it right. The answer is C. So we have statement 1 and statement 3, which is right, but statement 2 here is wrong. This is actually a bit of a technical thing, that why is it wrong? Because the exact round that have been mentioned in statement 2 is wrong. It's not Geneva round, but it's a Uruguay round. Now, why is this important? Because this particular round is one of the key factor through which this particular organization has been developed and made into a proper organization. So the statement 2 is wrong, basically based upon some technicality here. And statement 1, like I said, the first statement, it is an international level legal agreement between all the nations. So this is right. The third statement is also right. The compulsory licensing, that is also a method through which the developing nations have allowed a lot of medicines to be produced locally in that particular country. And India has actually used compulsory license in previous history as well. So also these are few ideas with respect to TRIPS and WTO. Make sure you go through other ideas also, like what else comes under TRIPS. There's this copyright things, there's industrial designs, there's geographical indications, patents, trademarks. So a lot of different things come under TRIPS. Do look into that. If you're talking about WTO, so who are the member nations? Are all the countries in the world member nations of WTO? Because it's not. There are some countries which are not members of WTO, and there are some countries which are actually observer of WTO. Like even Bhutan is an observer of WTO, and a lot of Middle East nations as well as your North African continent. Multiple countries are actually observer of this particular body. So that is also important. That is also one aspect to look from for your prelims question. Let's move on to the next topic, which is regarding the sovereign credit rating. Now, this topic is actually a lot of times in news. You see a lot of time that so-and-so company has reduced the ratings of India. And this is important because these ratings ultimately determine the amount of investors, especially the foreign investment that comes into a country. So that is why this topic actually becomes important. So the first statement here is that it shows the level of risk that is associated with lending to a particular country, since it is applied to all the bonds issued by the government. And second is it considers various factors such as political environment, economic status, credit worthiness to assign an appropriate credit rating. So answer for this particular question is that both the statements are right here. In fact, the idea behind sovereign credit rating is actually run by the idea of how do we judge the credit worthiness of any country. So that is what is the first statement here, that what is the level of risk that is associated with that particular country. So that is the idea here. There are basically, if you've heard, there are three basic agencies which are involved in sovereign credit rating. Number one is Moody's service, Fitch ratings, Standard and Poor's, and the credit rating system actually stretches from AAA grade to your grade D. And if a country gets a good grade, that means the level of investment is more secure there. As we go down, obviously that means there's a poor rating. So for Standards and Poor, anything that is above BBB minus or higher is a good investment. and anything below double B plus and lower is like a junk kind of a grade level. And for Moody, again, that becomes Baa3. Anything higher than that is a good investment, and anything lower than Ba1 is a very risky investment. So that is the basic idea behind sovereign credit. The second statement is also right, because it's not just economic level of engagement that these companies are judging. Even the political environment and overall investment conditions is very important here. So they are looking into a lot of economic parameters as well, like your per capita income. What is the range of that? What is the GDP growth of that country? What is the rate of inflation in that particular country? How much is their external debt? That is also one thing. What is the level of their economic development? So these are certain criteria based upon which the credit rating of a sovereign nation is calculated. And then it is renewed on in a year and put out across at the global level. So that is the concept related to sovereign credit rating. Next, we have trade policy review mechanism. Now, again, something related to WTO. So, WTO is important topic this year. Look into various different ideas with respect to WTO. Google some of the ideas. If there's something in current affairs, make sure you take note of it. So that is important. So this is like this particular session was actually done for India, and it is basically monitoring of your trade related policy at the global level. So the first statement here is that it is an important mechanism under WTO organization, which is completely correct. Second is that it facilitates a smooth functioning of the multilateral trade system by enhancing the trade policies of a nation or member nation. So again, that is very much correct, because that is what is happening in this particular mechanism, that they go through whatever the trade policies are, whatever custom and tariff duties that have been applied, whether they are in consonance with the WTO related measures, everything. So all that is reviewed. And the last statement is that all the WTO members are subject to review under the trade review mechanism. This statement is also absolutely right. In fact, based upon the level of development, like some of the higher developed nations, like say for United States, China, Japan, this review happens every 3 years. For some next 16 countries, it happens on a 5-yearly basis. For some other countries which are less developed, it might happen in a 7-yearly basis. So yes, this kind of mechanism happens through all the countries who are member of WTO. So this was another aspect with respect to WTO, and all the statements in this particular question are right. So this was also something important piece of news this year. And finally, we have Digital Services Act. Now, this was also something that was there in your current news affairs. So do look into this kind of idea, because there have been a lot of talks, especially in G7 and all these nations, about how do we bring in some of the charges to these huge MNCs that provide with digital services across the globe, and they take benefit out of not being taxed in those nations and getting revenue out of them. So that is an important topic. Now, this is specifically about Digital Service Act. The first statement here is that it is a value-added tax on digital services where the consumer bears the entire burden on the value of final product. And second is that it is adopted by India, Italy, Turkey, which discriminate against US companies. So, the question here is, which statement is correct? Now, what is a value-added tax? Now, VAT, like we had in India, and now we have GST, all these are basically value-adding tax. And if you know, even GST is a tax which creates a burden on the last person. So it's a destination-based act. So who is the consumer that is going to feel the brute force of this particular act, this particular tax. But in case of Digital Services Act, it does not happen in the similar way. Like we have something called as Netflix tax. Now, Netflix tax is a value-added tax on digital services which is being provided, and that kind of tax is something that creates pressure on the final consumer. But in case of these taxes like digital services taxes and GAFA tax like Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple related tax, all these are not taxes which creates pressure on the consumer, but these are actually taxes upon those companies, right? So yeah, the first statement is not right in this particular question. So yeah, this statement is wrong. And then we have the second statement, which is actually right, because this was the basic issue. Like recently, if you read the news, even USA has started inquiring into these kind of taxes, because mostly it is these companies which are targeted. So they've started inquiring into this particular tax. India earlier had a thing called equalization levy, which was like set at 6%, and it was introduced in 2016. And now what we have is your digital service taxes, which is like 2% above, and it has been charged to any business which earns above amount of 2 crore. So that is the basic idea behind Digital Services Act, tax, sorry. So that is it, guys, for today. Hope this video helped you revise some of the topics. Again, I would like to add, go and register for the webinar. You can get few tips for your prelims, what to do and what to avoid. So that is important to get that extra edge for 10 to 20 marks in your prelims. Thank you so much and all the best.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Civilsdaily.